Greetings and salutations, everyone, for the second installment on the Mount Ebal inscription between Drs. Sean McDowell and Jeremiah Johnston. If you haven't watched the first video, I encourage you and recommend that you watch the first video because my recap isn't really going to go through all that. So, as far as the recap is concerned, we discussed the inscription, the size of it, the alleged importance of this inscription as it pertains to biblical studies, and how it really doesn't relate or support the early date Exodus. Dr. Johnson here says something quite interesting in regards to the makeup of this the fixio or cursed tablet later on in the video. And at the end of the video, there are a couple of questions I'd like to try and answer that were put forth by the audience. So, without further ado, here is the second installment. I'll also bring up the inscription again for another reference, and the mountains themselves. Actually, I'll do that right now. So, let me see. I might have to do that. Whoops. Yes, here we go. So here's the inscription blown up, as you can see, and it's only 2 centimeters, and it's folded, so we cannot actually open it because it'll just crumble. I mean, it is 3,000 years old. And they're based on tomography or I think it's tomography. We can actually find out what the letters are on the inside of the inscription, which is what we're waiting for. The problem is at their press conference, which we'll get into later, they actually go into why they went to a press conference instead of going through the proper channels. We only got a drawing of 3 letters of the Tetragrammaton, which seems disappointing that because there weren't any pictures, there are no pictures. We're still waiting for a peer-reviewed article that they said back in March would come out by the end of summer. Now, officially, it's still summer for 2 weeks, but here we are approaching mid-September, and there's still no peer-reviewed article, which is, to say the problematic, and that's the least of our problems. So another reference I wanted to give you guys before opening up the conclusion here are the mountains here. This is quite small, and I'm sorry if you can't see this on your screens. I couldn't find a larger image, and I searched and searched and searched. But here you've got the town of Shechem in the valley here, just before these 2 mountains, and you see these 2 mountains. On the left is Mount Gerizim, which is the mountain of blessings, and on the right is the Mount of Curses, or Mount Ebal or Ebal. I just wanted to give you guys a reference of where these 2 mountains are and where the altar, Joshua's altar, is spelt out in the book of Joshua in chapter 8, is. So Joshua's altar there would be on Mount Ebal, which would be on the right if you can't see it that well. And again, my apologies for not finding a better image for you guys to see. But I just thought I'd give you a couple more references and a reminder of what the inscription actually looks like. It is quite small. So without further ado, we will continue this interview.
Archaeology is controversy. It should be contested. And as Dr. Stripling has taught me over the last 10 years, the goal of archaeology is not excavation, it's publication. So we need to make these finds known. And then Sean, this is what you do such a great job of, and you always have. We need to help people understand, why does this even matter for my life with everything I'm going through? Why would I pop in and give an hour of my time to Dr. McDowell in this channel? Well, it has huge implications. For the Bible as a historical document, if you're a person who believes the scripture is infallible, it has significant implications on our life.
Talk to me a little bit more about what the curses were and what they meant in Israel at that time. So again, Joshua 8, I believe you said Deuteronomy 11, 20, 26 or 27.
11:29.
Given that the word curse shows up, 10 or 12 times in this inscription, for people who say, I might not have a theological understanding of how this fits into God's covenant with Israel, what was a curse, what was going on, what would it mean? And this is a truth, even if it turns out that this discovery is somehow a forgery or fake or dated 500 years later, we still need to understand what these curses in themselves meant at that time. So give us some background theologically, historically, biblically of
Yeah.
what this even meant.
I love your questions, Sean. These are awesome questions. So I have my Bible out to actually Joshua 8. Let me run back to Deuteronomy 11:29. When the Lord your God brings you into the land and helps you take possession of it, you must pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim and the curse at Mount Ebal. These two mountains are west of the Jordan River in the land of the Canaanites who live in the Jordan Valley. And then as Deuteronomy does, it's repeated in Deuteronomy 27. And one thing I love about Judaism is the symbolism with which Judaism, the practicality of the religion, and that they would literally symbolically all day long pronounce blessings and then pronounce curses with the altar in the middle. And as Dr. Stripling has pointed out, I love how practical he gets. You know, the altar is not on the Mount of Blessing. That's the place of blessing. The altar is on the Mount of Curses, the place of sin. And all of us, you know, we need that altar. And this is such a great, this is a great symbol of what Jesus did for us. We need the altar in the place of sin. We all sin. We all mess up. We all are on the Mount of Cursing often. And so they would chant these blessings and these curses back and forth, and they would do it all day. And again, you know, this is consistent with what we see. There's a coherence to the Old Testament. Say these things, bind them to you, teach them, repeat them to your children and your grandchildren. And we see them just simply doing, and literally in a...
And that's what they were taught in the book of Deuteronomy. I'm not sure if it's in the book of Deuteronomy. Forgive me for that one. But that's what they were taught when they entered the promised land, or just before or upon entering the promised land, is to repeat them. Bind them on your wrists, your forehead, etc. Learn it. Study it. So that's what he's saying here is learn it, study it before you enter it. Because you're entering a land, you're entering a land that you did not, that you are inheriting. You're going to enter cities that you did not build. You're going to take over farms you're going to take over fields that you did not make, basically, cultivate. So that was the point of that. Anyway, I'll let them continue here.
A very physical way. And by the way, they have the provenance of the lead. I forgot to mention that. They know the lead is from a mine in Greece that's consistent with the late Bronze era, late Bronze too. So, I mean...
Which I find telling here that Dr. Johnston actually says this. He actually says this, that they found the lead in a mine of... the lead can be traced back to a mine in Greece that dates to the LBA 2. Which doesn't really support the early date of the Exodus, since they think it began... Since the early date of the Exodus was in the 15th century, the 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom. So I think it's very telling that it seems to not click with him when he actually says, oh, we can trace the lead in the tablet back to a mine in Greece that dates to the LBA 2. What is interesting here, again, is that he says lead. Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of iron, so forgive me if I don't know my precious metals. But it seems to suggest something of the really late Bronze Age, more of the collapse, or the early Iron Age. So I don't know how this would support the early date of the Exodus. If the early date of the Exodus is in the 15th century, but this tablet seems to date to the LBA 2 as far as the lead's concerned. It seems more to support the late date Exodus than the early date Exodus. And even if it doesn't support either date of the Exodus, it's a cursed tablet found in the Iron Age, early Iron Age. So, anyway.
Again, if it walks like a duck and if it quacks like a duck, again, I'm waiting to see something that would cause me to think it was a forgery. And I also know Dr. Stripling's integrity, having been there for 25 years, Sean. If there was a problem, he would be the first to say, hey, you know, we made a mistake, or there was a mistake in this process. He's got a reputation that's much stronger than just this lead tablet. Although, again, he and his team from University of Haifa, Mainz, they're saying it's the discovery of their lifetime. And I think we need to pay careful attention to that. So that's the blessing, that's the biblical context. And then, of course, at the end of Joshua 8, that's, again, it's just in those last few verses of that chapter where, again, we see this commemorated.
Now, it sounds like as you just look at a find like this, you kind of assume it's, let's say, innocent until proven guilty. If I'm reading your assessment right.
Really? Okay. Yeah.
In the sense that, and my guess is you would base this in your trust in Dr. Stripling, your relationship with him, see him as a good scholar, and your other positive evidence that the Bible is true and reliable, etc. Did I read that correctly? And why do you approach this one with just more confidence? Because some of my skeptical friends immediately approach it differently, and we all have biases, not right or wrong. Some are proven right,
Absolutely.
some are proven wrong at
Yeah.
different times. But what's the source of that, and did I read your assessment correctly?
So before Dr. Johnston here gives an answer, I would like to say skeptics like myself don't really, at least as far as the tablet's concerned, when I say skeptic, I'm talking about the tablet. My skeptics aren't with the tablet themselves. I'm skeptical of how they're handling it. Again, I think we said in the previous video, I'm going to say it again in this one. The problem is that they did not go through the proper channels. You don't really go to a press conference first. Usually you write a peer-reviewed article later, or you present your findings at a conference, whether that's the SBL or the ETS. They do this in the field of Egyptology as well. They do a peer-reviewed article that appears in the JRC, or the JARCE. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that journal wrong, but that's what they do. And it's published in there, in that journal. It can be published in another one, but more often than not, that's the one you want if you're an Egyptologist. Or it's presented at the annual conference, or it's at regional conferences that fall under the headship of RC. So the same thing applies with biblical scholarship and biblical archaeology. They did not go through the proper channels, and I think that's telling, and it should raise a few eyebrows that they did not do this. They just went straight to the press. So, and that sort of ties into the sensationalism I talked about at the beginning of my previous video on this. So I'll let Johnston here continue.
I think the source of my confidence is understanding archaeology and understanding the process with which archaeology happens. This was not purchased on the black market. And again, if we had time, I mean, the provenance of so many fragments that we don't question is just an interesting story in and of itself. I mean, if anyone does a deep dive in how any of these artifacts get into museums, you can see how messy it is. And we have something that is organic in that Scott and his team, a volunteer, Frankie Snyder, hats off to Frankie Snyder, wet sifting as his lead volunteer, recovered this tablet working. I understand the process. And again, I'm a critical thinker. I know how to read the evidence. And then I have trust in not just Scott, but the team, and also those that interpreted the tomographic scans as well. So, I don't get hugely excited about these things until we need to. And I think this is a place where I'm really excited about it. But at the same time, my faith doesn't hang on this one find. And if something weird comes out, and I mean, biblical scholarship is whacked sometimes. So,
That is one thing I will agree on.
And I got all kinds of dad jokes that my wife doesn't want me to share about archaeology too. So it's a funny world. Again, it's messy, but I like the process that Dr. Scott is. He works that much harder because he does believe the Bible is a historical document. Kudos to him for that.
It really is pretty interesting that you see mistakes made on both sides. You see some people
Absolutely.
who are overzealous, and we read in Mark 1, read in these forgeries of Dead Sea Scrolls. We also see people...
That's a great example that Dr. McDowell brought up here about the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Bible Museum in D.C. and how some of those were fragments, because we do have some people that are zealous in that regard as far as archaeology is concerned. They see what they want to see. and they discover what they want to discover, and they hear what they want to hear. And that can be very problematic and troublesome for people who are zealous. And in this case, I really do believe that Associates for Biblical Research here, people like Dr. Scott Striplin and Dr. Johnston, I think their biases are clouding the issue, if you will, at least on this discovery. So, yeah.
Denying that David ever existed, and then we have the Tel Dan inscription, and then we find David's palace, and that seems to have been moved. So we've got to find that balance in the middle. And in some ways right now, you could say we ought to wait for this thing to come out with peer review. But on the other hand, people are talking about this. People are wanting to make sense of it. Let's report where we're at, given the information we have, and then wait with anticipation and trust the data where it leads. That's how...
Exactly. You publish this in a peer-reviewed article. You don't go to the press like that. You release it at a conference. You release it in a peer review. You publish your findings in a peer-reviewed article. Those are the proper channels. And then afterwards, you can go to the press. That's how this works. Yeah, we are talking about it. Dr. McDowell is absolutely right. We are talking about it. This is a discovery, but the problem is they've closeted this discovery. We've only got a couple of drawings and one picture of it. Or we got more than one picture, but like we're not going off of anything. Like, give us reference shots, something. Throw something at us. And additionally, he is right. I will side with Johnston on this one, on this aspect, is that this find was not found on the black market. It was found wet sifting, which means when Zertal did his work 40 years ago from 82 to 89 on Mount Ebal, what you do, again, I've said this, I really shouldn't repeat it, but here we are. When you dig, you create heaps. You dig the dirt. Well, the dirt's got to go somewhere, so they create these heaps. And so what they did was they went through these heaps and they wet sifted. And they found this curse tablet in the sifting, through the sifting. That's how they found it. So it wasn't found on the black market. It wasn't purchased on the black market. This was found, but I will say it was not found in situ, and it is unprovenanced. So we don't know the source. It could have been a heap. It could have been, like, we just don't know. So we've got questions that we want answers, and it seems like they haven't provided for it. They've promised a peer-reviewed article at the end of summer. We still haven't got it. We're still waiting for it. Here it is, the end of summer. 2 weeks into September, possibly. Summer officially ends in 2 weeks, and we still have no peer-reviewed paper. Not SBL. Now, SBL comes up in November in Denver. ETS, I'm not sure. Is ETS? I don't know if ETS is in San Antonio, but ETS, possibly. We'll see. But we have nothing so far. That's where the problem is.
How I try to approach this. Is there anything for you in this find that gives you pause? Because for me, some of the things, if I try to look at this as objectively or skeptically as I could, some of the finds, like I said earlier, are just the greatest discovery in 1,000 years. Seems to be found in a place that it'd be easy for somebody to plant it there. And I'm not saying that is actually the case, but there are questions still remaining that need to be figured out. Are there certain things, even though you're confident in this, are there certain things that give you pause? Like maybe it's what you said, what's written on the side we don't know yet. But are any things in particular that gives you pause for this find?
Absolutely. I mean, I want to read the peer-reviewed evidence, and hats off to Dr. Stripling, because he's already been offered debates with like our friend Justin Brierley over in the UK.
Oh, good.
And Scott's.
And that's great. But where's the peer-reviewed article? That's my question.
Stripling has said, you know what, let's hold off. I don't want anyone to be at a disadvantage. Let me get out the material, the peer-reviewed material, so everyone can look at it. And so, yeah, naturally, until I read the peer-reviewed material, that would give me pause. But again, one of the practical applications, and I think one of the cool things, Sean, that your interview is doing right now is this is also shedding light for me on how, you know, scholarship is so highly specialized. We need to understand more about the material culture. We need to understand how to do history. And we need to understand how archaeology works, because I'm seeing some hot takes on social media from conservatives, those in the middle, and those on the left. And it just honestly betrays their ignorance of the whole process of
Mm,
archaeology. And I would just encourage people to go do a dig next time you're in Israel. Take an extra day or two with not just Scott, any of the archaeologists over there. But I also want to make sure people understand how expensive these digs are. There's only about 100 that happen. They happen during 2 seasons a year. I mean, do you even know? I'm not saying you, but do our viewers even know? Like, archaeology doesn't happen 52 weeks a year generally. These are expensive. College students raise money. They volunteer their time. They get up before the sun comes up. They eat oats, and then they go over and they do archaeology. And so, again, I'm a New Testament scholar, Jewish.
which I'm kind of baffled that you're commenting. Ooh, I'm kind of baffled why he's commenting on this. I know he said he was with the team and with Scott Striplin and everything and blah, blah, but he's a New Testament scholar. This seems kind of out of his field, is out of his area of expertise. And I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. I'm not an archaeologist either. I'm an Old Testament text critic, so um, yeah. So I will say this stuff is my opinion as well, but I do know a little something about how scholarship works and how scholarship is presented through the proper channels and everything. I want to see this basically so I can read the inscription for myself rather than relying on him and saying it's a chiasm and it's cursed, 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 and then you get the chiasm A, B, C, C, B, A, and all this and that. I want to look at the text itself, just like these other Old Testament scholars want to look at the text. But they haven't produced anything, which is problematic again. I have to keep repeating that. It's a problem. It certainly has raised my eyebrows. So,
Burial traditions have assisted me greatly in how I interpret the Gospels. The process of ossuagium and second burial sheds light on Luke 9 and the person who's delaying their obedience to Jesus. And Jesus says, let the dead bury their dead. Knowing something about Jewish burial traditions from archaeology, from the material culture, aids us and brings precision to our interpretation. So for the scholars and the perhaps those that are wanting to go into scholarship, Christianity is a friend of archaeology. And again, a lot of other religions and belief systems, Sean, they avoid any interaction with archaeology. They avoid that intersection. And one thing that I think is great about our faith is we're willing to get our hands dirty, no pun intended, in the material culture and say, hey, if these events really occurred as we believe and as the Word of God says that they did, there should be fallout all over the Mediterranean world. And the good news is there's fallout all over the Mediterranean world. And again, that's why I think my encouragement to our audience would be definitely check out an archaeological dig. Understand the science of how archaeology is done. This is a win for archaeology. Just people talking about archaeology is a win for it. But I think we can get so specialized in our silos in scholarship. And we're also busy publishing and teaching and writing. We need to learn a little bit more about the process of archaeology before we say, wow, this is a sensational claim. There's no peer-reviewed release. And oh, by the way, Scott's a Christian. So,
I've got no problem with him being a Christian. No problem with that. My problem is, again, the peer-reviewed article, the proper channels. That is the problem. That is the very problem here. And I'm kind of baffled that Johnston isn't even admitting that he's just says, oh, these people are just concerned about the proper channels. Well, yes, that's how it's done. That's how it's been done. So, yeah, that's a problem. Yes, we're skeptical because of it. And and since this interview, there still is no peer-reviewed article. So
this is probably a joke. I think that's going a little too far.
Sounds like some people dismissed the find before it even came out pretty soon, and you have some concerns about that. So I guess it seems to me we could overly embrace it, but also there's some people who are really quickly rejecting it, and I would want to know why, at least before the peer-reviewed data comes out.
Well, and I think it's just the zeitgeist. People, we live in the world of alternative facts, conspiracy theories, and we don't even know how to have a conversation with each other. And so, again, the more I know about my faith, and again, Sean, thank you for showing so many thousands of people this. The more we know about our faith, the more confident we're going to be in a faith dialogue, which means we're going to listen better, we're going to communicate more carefully. We're not going to look for the bulldoze hot take, and we're going to be able to have this discussion. We need to have the discussion. And we need to, again, shed light on this discovery. We need to debate about it. I hope there's conferences at SBL and ETS debating this find, the interpretation. And I know Scott and the team welcome that.
My question is, it's a good point. It should be brought up at SBL and ETS, but the problem is if there's no peer-reviewed article, I'm skeptical that there's going to be a paper at ETS or SBL. I want to be wrong on this. I want to be wrong. And then people ask questions at these conferences. I want to be wrong. I really do. But I really am skeptical. I really doubt that there will be a paper by November for SBL. November. We're 2 months. Yes. 2 months away, October and then November. We are 2 months away from that. And there's still no peer-reviewed paper. And actually, I think submissions have already ended for this year's SBL. So there is next year's SBL. So we'll see, though. We'll see. Only time will tell. But I'm really, really skeptical about this.
Last question for you, and then maybe we'll come to questions if we have some from the audience. Okay. Hopefully we've tried to model this. But my question is how, just you and I are both Christians, we should talk about a find like this. When I first saw the story, I did a TikTok video, threw it on Instagram, made a YouTube short out of it. But I tried to say, hey, here's a find. If it's true, here's why it would be very significant. There's no peer review yet, so let's hold off on getting too excited. But this is a story we should follow that, if accurate, could be very, very significant.
Exactly.
That's the way I approach it, partly because I'm not an archaeologist. I've done some research.
Exactly. Cut the sensationalism. Just say you found this in wet sifting. Say you found this cursed tablet near the place of Joshua's altar, which that's debated as well if that's Joshua's altar or not, but I'm not going to get into that. Just say you found this through wet sifting. And then if you did a peer-reviewed article, or if you presented your research at a conference, say SBL or ETS, that would have been fine. Would have been fine. But they didn't. That's why we're kind of skeptical. No pictures at this conference. And if you do this, which is unusual to go to a press conference instead of an actual academic conference or something, you present pictures to stave off, to more or less whet the appetite until a peer-reviewed article comes out. So,
research and evidence demands verdict. We have a chapter on archaeology. I've read books, etc. But that is not my field. So, how do you suggest we talk about something like this as Christians, where we don't overstate it, but we also don't give in to maybe certain skeptical assumptions that potentially dismiss this too quickly?
I think you just explained perfectly how we should have a measured response to it, but we should discuss it, and we should let people know these kinds of discoveries are being made all the time. Now, this one happens to be unique in that it's a discovery of a lifetime. But when you see the coins that Dr. Stripling and his team are discovering, that again, every political leader named in the New Testament, they have coinage that they themselves have discovered. This builds a certain level of confidence in that when we approach the text, when we look at the juridical procedure and the resurrection narratives, and we see it's entirely consistent with Jewish burial traditions, and it's consistent with what we would expect from the material culture, This excites us, and so I think you really exemplify this well, Sean. We can be excited about it. That's okay. Hey, let's get excited about anything that'll get people excited about the Bible. I'm excited about anything that will draw people to the text. Hey, that's not a bad thing. And again, controversy is the mother's milk of archaeology. I can't say that enough. And so, talking about it, publishing it, discussing it, doing interviews. Scott, God bless him, he's done hundreds of interviews. I would encourage people to check that out for themselves. But get to the land of Israel, get to the Bible lands,
Amen.
And it's not just the land of Israel. Get to Rome, get to Turkey, get on those trekker and just go see the sites. It's exciting. And, for every one of these forgeries, there's 1,000 authentic finds. And so we have, again, what level of confidence is enough? I mean, that's what you have to ask yourself. At what point, we're not going to be able to answer it with certainty, but at what point do we have enough level of confidence to say, you know what, this is probably correct. We have every reason to believe this is what we think it is. And so I think you've done a great job, Sean, of just pointing out, let's have a measured response, but also let's not be so insulated by how the culture is now that the second you say you're a Christian and you have an archaeological find, oh my gosh, I don't believe you. What's the problem? Guilty until proven innocent. And we've done ourselves a disservice. I've encouraged, Sean, there are schools that will show videos, YouTube videos of, chariot wheels in the Red Sea. That's a hoax. And so again, as Christians,
So thankful he actually said that the chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea is a hoax, because it is. It is.
We need to be more careful and more critical. There's great reasons to believe in the Exodus, but hoax are not one.
Good word. Hey, here's a couple questions I'd love to hear you weigh in on.
All right, here we go. I'm going to try and answer these questions faithfully. I think the first one I really can't answer, but I'll try to answer to the best of my ability. The second one I think I can answer with some measure of confidence. So don't come after me. Don't at me, if you will. So here we go.
On someone, it's actually a comment, and Cindy says, the Jews do archaeology, Hindus do archaeology, Confucius followers do archaeology, other religious people do archaeology. Saying only Christians do this is just plain wrong. Now, I want you to weigh in here, but let me presume to say, I think what you're arguing here is not that Hindus, Confucians, and Hindus don't do archaeology, but the Christian faith uniquely is a historically based religion in which we find intersection with the truth of the claims about Christianity, or we could say the Judeo-Christian religion, in a way that Eastern religions are not as historically based. In a simple way, it's 1 Corinthians 15. If Jesus is not risen, our faith is in vain. So did I get correctly what you'd say? Add or take away from that?
Yeah, and Cindy, thanks for the question. I want to make sure I clarify. Atheists do archaeology. Agnostics do archaeology. What the point I was trying to make is that archaeology is the friend of Judaism and Christianity, in that we're a historically based religion and belief system. The evidence matters in our belief system. When the New York Times is running op-eds by Islamic clerics, and I've published in this on my op-ed page on Fox News, that the Jewish temple never existed. That's not helping anyone. It's not helping the land of Israel. It's not helping Islam. And so that's what I mean by these other belief systems, especially the made in America cults and religions. They avoid archaeology as much as they can as an evidential basis for their belief system. That's the point I was making.
Okay. Honestly, my take on that question would be that archaeology is not confined to just one religion. And the mythologies of China, of ancient China, maybe even Mesoamerica, these are myths that sort of they trying to gather my thoughts here. They sort of explain not so much how the natural world was created. Most of them have some sort of moral attached to them, some sort of story you learned, a lesson, a moral lesson, if you will, that's attached to them, rather than saying, oh, this is how I don't know, insert God here created the world or the universe and everything in it. So that's more of my less. So as far as archaeology is concerned, it wasn't to disprove a religion, but although it has that capability, I don't necessarily think that Christians are the only ones who care about archaeology. You've got, like Johnston said, you've got the atheists, the agnostics, you've got Hindus, you've got all these people who do care and do correct archaeology to prove that, to corroborate or to edify or to defend their own religions. So
Gotcha. Fair enough. Let's go to Levi Dade. Nice to see you, Levi. He says, this is for Dr. Stripling, so obviously you can't speak for Dr. Stripling, but we'll have you weigh in and give your sense.
Yes, this is the question I feel fairly confident on. Over fairly confident, I should say. So I'll let Johnston answer the question first, and then I'll answer after.
If this is confirmed, would that discredit the documentary hypothesis, or are the two mutually exclusive? And I'm seeing some people weigh in on this. Some saying it would question the documentary hypothesis, others saying it wouldn't call into question the documentary hypothesis. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Dr. Stripling has talked about this, so I can't speak for him. But for me, and as far as in my field, biblical scholarship, it would, the documentary hypothesis is that we don't have El and Yahweh together in any extant writings, and so this find certainly calls that into question. And so I would take that seriously. That's just one aspect of that would cause the documentary hypothesis to crumble in my mind. It already does in my mind, because I take the Old Testament literally.
And again, he said he takes the Old Testament literally, or he takes it literally, which can be rather problematic if you take it with a wooden literal meaning, which I think he goes for here. I think that's what he means here.
By that, I mean, I believe that it's a historical document, not put together over hundreds of years by different collators.
All right. So as far as that question was concerned, if archaeology and the documentary hypothesis are mutually exclusive, or if this just completely disproves the documentary hypothesis, I don't think it has any bearing on it. I already do not agree with the DH. There are also other theories as far as how the Old Testament was put together. There you've got the supplementary hypothesis, and you've got the dual origins hypothesis. Those are two lesser important, but there's more than one theory of how the Old Testament was put together. This archaeological discovery, this Ebal cursed tablet discovery, doesn't really disprove the documentary hypothesis, I think. Yeah, it's an inscription tablet that was found through wet sifting on Mount Ebal in the early Iron Age, but that doesn't really mean, or late Bronze Age, but that doesn't really mean it disproves archaeology. That's again another sensationalist claim to say that. It requires more evidence, which I think exists outside of this cursed tablet. And if you want to, again, I actually wrote a paper, and I devoted 4 or 5 pages out of my 24 pages to the documentary hypothesis, using people like Dr. Van Saters to strengthen up their arguments along with others. So as far as that's concerned, even though my focus was on defending the early date of the Pentateuch rather than going after the documentary hypothesis, I think there's much better evidence than this cursed tablet to discredit the documentary hypothesis. And again, you also have the supplementary hypothesis and the dual origins hypothesis. So you've got a couple other hypotheses of how the Old Testament may have come about. So,
all right, just for the record, this might be the best comment I've seen on my YouTube channel yet. Myself says archaeology is not boring. Ask Dr. Indiana Jones. Have him on the show.
Good luck and Godspeed with that one.
Man, Sean, we need to bring our whips.
If anybody knows him and has a connection, I would stop what I'm doing and bring Dr. Jones on the show right away. That'd be hilarious. Hey, we're getting near the end. Did I miss anything? Were there other points that you wanted to make, clarifications you want to draw out? This is pretty thorough.
I think you've done just a really great job with your questions, Sean. So thank you so much for.
All right, so they go into the thank yous and praises and stuff. So that was this video on the Mount Ebal inscription, the cursed inscription, the cursed tablet. And again, my final thoughts would be just cut the sensationalism. They just needed to say, hey, look, we found a cursed tablet, presented some photos of the tablet, do a little more, just say, hey, we're going to do some studies on it to find out what is actually on the inside a little more, and find out where it goes from there, and then release it, and then basically just announce the find, and then release it in a peer-reviewed article in a journal, a credible journal, or announce it at a conference, at an academic conference like SBL or ETS. And then we go from there. You can let the press have it from there. But I honestly and seriously think that the way they went about this process, finding this cursed tablet, along with the sensationalism, is skeptical, and it has, for my sake as well, raised some eyebrows. Now, this is an actual archaeological find. I will give you that. Like he said, it wasn't found. I don't believe it was, off the black market or anything. It was found through wet sifting. But I just think that they see what they want to see, and they're making this to be the best find of the century or something like that. And I don't think that's the right way to handle it. I just don't think that's the right way to handle it. So anyway, if you guys like this and actually stayed towards the end, please give this video a like and click the subscribe button if you like more of this content. Anyways, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.